Hey, we did it.
It worked.
Yes. Woo. But the music
It
is
like
loud.
was it loud for you? Okay.
The
Well,
music is loud.
we're just gonna. Is this? It's not still playing music for you, is it?
Yes. Oh,
What?
it's
It's not supposed to do that.
oh, so you know why I'm getting let me exit out of this.
That's because you
Oh,
had that tab open with your YouTube channel open.
yes.
That's what I
Yes, I'm
warned you
like,
about, Tammy.
I know you did. I should have known better. Oh,
Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's episode of the Off Road Insiders podcast. I'm Nate,
and
and that's
I'm
Tammy,
Tammy. Yeah, that's me.
and we're trying yet another platform for streaming. This should hopefully go better than last episode, but here we are.
And yes, new beard color.
New beard color. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Are you
Yeah,
getting ready for
it was just
Christmas?
half. It was just half, right? Now I bleached the whole beard and now it's all red. Very festive.
So,
What you been up to, Tammy? Did your engine explode yet?
um, I thought it was going to. Actually, no, I didn't. So, I'll start from the beginning kind of. So back in 2020 in Texas, my check engine light went on. We switched the spark plugs, we did what are they? The injectors, coil packs, injectors.
Okay.
And the code is a misfire cylinder 6. So I ran and then so then fast forward 2 years later, I still have the check engine light, but there's oil everywhere. So it was the oil filter housing adapter. So I
Yeah,
got
there you
that.
go.
Yep, I got that replaced in Minnesota. And I don't know how long that had been leaking. Who knows? It could have been months because just a little bit of oil underneath your Jeep can look like massive amounts of oil.
Yeah, and
Um,
depending what climate you live in, it'll be there for a very long time.
yes,
It'll look a little less wet as it gets older, but yeah.
right. So anyway, fast forward to Cheyenne, and I work at TNT Customs. They did a compression test on my engine. It misfire cylinder 6. It had low compression, 58, I think, PSI. I think that's what it was. And it's supposed to
I'm not
be
sure.
like,
I'm not really an engine guy.
anyway, yeah, it was half of what the other cylinders were. So we got a remand engine. We replaced it. As soon as we replaced it, everything was ready to go. Daniel turns it on, and the check engine light was still there. And it was a P06DD code, which is the oil pressure sensor. So we traded the old one out, got a new one. It went off for a little bit. Then it came back on. Then it would go off and come back on. This has been going on since June. So we tried a new oil filter. We tried the new sensor. Daniel put in thicker oil, thinking maybe that would help. That didn't work. And then the next option was to replace the oil filter housing unit because we thought maybe it was where that sensor plugs into the adapter.
Mm-hmm.
But while he was in there, he looked at the knock sensor harness. So the knock sensor harness is a wiring harness that sits in the valley, I think you called it, of where you place the oil filter housing. It sits in there. So when your oil filter housing leaks, it leaks into that valley and goes down where the main seal is, and that's how it gets underneath. So anyway, that harness had been soaking in oil for who knows how long.
Yeah.
And
heat and oil.
Yes.
Because it's right on top of your engine where it's hot.
Exactly. So it started so it has the oil pressure sensor, the oil temperature sensor, and there are 2 knock sensors. And I just learned that the knock sensor senses vibrations in your engine, apparently, I think, if I'm right about that. But anyway, so it's wrapped up in this cloth. I'm guessing it's a heat cloth maybe, and then tape. So he decided to go in and look at these wires, and they were, the wires have what do you call that plastic coating over them. Those had
The
all
insulation.
those all started to meld together. There were some points where they had deteriorated, and the wires were exposed, and they were sparking with each other. And
Okay.
they were shorting out the whole wire harness. So we just replaced the whole thing. Knock on wood, check engine light is off. So that's the story of the
That
engine.
that seems like a good bet, right? I mean,
Yeah.
electrical problems will cause all kinds of odd things.
And it was
Um,
random. The check engine light would go off, it would come
yeah,
back on. It would go off, it would come back on. So
yeah, and
if
I
you have an oil filter housing adapter leak, just go ahead and replace. And Daniel thinks too, because they took out that wiring harness the first time to put in the new oil filter. They took it out again for my engine, and just the handling of it.
yeah,
Probably,
when you disturb wires, especially as a Jeep gets older, sometimes the insulation gets brittle.
yep, brittle was
Sometimes
the word he used. Yep.
just like disturbing them is enough
Yes.
to cause shorts and stuff. When I did all that work to the 4.0, when I took off the valve cover and replaced the oil pan and the gasket and the rear main seal, when I did the valve cover, there was a bunch of wiring that I had to kind of get out of the way, and I was super paranoid the whole time because every
Yep.
time you touch or move anything, I'm always worried that something's gonna,
Yep.
some insulation's gonna crack or whatever. Now, honestly, most of the time you're fine, but I'm hyper paranoid when I'm touching old work
Yeah.
like that. So yeah, cool
So
that
the yeah,
that you found what's hopefully the smoking gun, and
right.
that solves the problem.
So somebody did ask, well, could that have been your original? Was your engine really bad? Yes, the engine was really bad. It was issues in that cylinder 6. So this was just like another issue, which is not surprising when you have Jeeps. Um,
Nope, not surprising at all.
and it was not hard to get this wiring harness. It was retail, it's $113. Daniel said he could rewire the whole thing, and I'm like, oh, because there were probably 8 different wires. Yeah, 8 or 9, I think. So anyway, that was my whole engine story. So let's hope you could, yeah, videos is right. You could actually feel the cylinder misfiring. I was so used to it. To me, it was like, oh, this is how my Jeep is.
Did
But as
that
soon as,
did it give you like a weird idle or a weird vibration or?
yeah, it was like you could like feel the Jeep doing this. The mechanics, the technicians, immediately when they get my Jeep, they're like, oh yeah, you got a bad cylinder.
It's funny, someone who like knows what they're doing when they get in
Right,
there, they know exactly what the problem is the second they see it. It's someone who's good at their job, someone who's good at their craft
right,
can do that.
right.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
So the other good news is I don't have tire pressure, TPMS, tire pressure monitors, right?
Hmm.
Is that what they're called? Yeah. Because I switched out to Colby valves, but those were with my Nexen tires. And for some reason, I thought they were in these new tires that I had. And Daniel's like, you don't, those are just regular valve stems. I'm like, oh, I totally forgot. My brain wasn't all with me way back there. So anyway, we ordered some tire pressure monitors, TPMS. Yeah.
Okay.
And we got them from Rock Auto. And apparently they're supposed to be just as good as buying the Jeep ones, but way less expensive because
Yeah, I
those things
get
are like $70 a piece
they
through
are.
Jeep.
They are. They're
Yeah.
not cheap. I get a lot of stuff from Rock Auto, and
Yeah.
generally, it's been good luck. Knock on wood or whatever. But
Right.
generally, I haven't had any issues with it. Now, you got to watch what you're buying, just like anywhere, because a lot of times the stuff you get there is off-brand. It's not, GM genuine, or I'm saying GM genuine because that's what I was thinking about last with my Cadillac.
Right. Yeah. Oh,
But
yeah. Yay. You got to
yeah,
tell
that's a whole
everyone.
thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, they're a lot of times they're not like they're lower quality, and that's why they're cheap. But sometimes you
Right.
can get like genuine Chrysler, genuine GM, genuine Ford, Mopar, whatever parts right from there, and they are so much cheaper than if you were to go to a dealer
Yeah.
or an auto parts store even to get them.
Right.
Because they're just I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they get them so cheap. Maybe they're stealing them from, off the back of trucks or something. I don't know, but I get cheap auto parts because of it. So
Right.
I'm not complaining.
So they were like 23 bucks a piece. So that beats 70 bucks a piece. So
Yeah, whenever I have any, and they have some of the weirdest parts that you can't go to AutoZone and get. You'll be like, if you can find a part number, you can drop it into Rock Auto's search and it'll find it for you.
right.
It's pretty crazy. And it'll find you stuff that's compatible with that part number.
Right.
So they do a crazy job. And again, I don't know how they're so cheap. Maybe somebody will tell us that they're, somehow some
Well,
kind of fraudulent company that's
right.
selling rebranded, not quite
Right.
genuine parts or something. I don't know.
Well, typically at our auto shop at TNT, we're strictly Mopar or Ford or whatever, or
Yeah.
Napa Auto Parts,
Well,
just because.
I've heard from professionals that, and I don't know how TNT does this, but I've heard from some professionals that they do not go to places like Rock Auto. They go to some like parts wholesaler, whatever, that they have a deal with, and
And
that's where they get all their parts from.
for warranty reasons too, because there are
Yeah.
times you get a brand new part that doesn't
Yep.
work,
Yep.
and warranty reasons. And Napa
So,
is very well respected in the auto
they end up
industry.
paying the price that particular wholesaler sells them the price or sells them the part for. They don't
Right.
shop around. They buy it.
Right.
That's the price the customer pays.
Right.
So sometimes I kind of wish they would shop around because you could save a whole bunch of money on those repairs.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
so
So you have some exciting news. I don't think
yeah,
we've mentioned this yet.
yep. So I mean, I've talked quite a bit about it over the past couple of months. But as you guys know, I was looking for a truck to replace the Cadillac with. Um, Initially, I was in the same boat that most sane people are in, that new trucks are just too expensive. And why does anybody ever buy a new truck? Because, oh my God, they're expensive. But the more I looked at not just the new market, but also the used market, the more I thought about, you know, warranty and the history of the vehicle and what had the vehicle been through before I got it. Because that's really exactly the issue I had with the
Mhm.
Cadillac. I had no idea what it had been through before I got it. As far as I know, it wasn't abused or anything, but I don't know how they maintained it. I don't know how, who they took it to for repairs, that kind of stuff. Was it some guy that barely knew what he was doing and just fixing stuff in his garage to save money? I don't know, right? But I had just like problem after problem with it, and I was just kind of fed up. So maybe I overcorrected. I'm not sure, but I ended up buying a brandy new 2024 Silverado 1500 with the 5.3 liter. And let me see if I can do this here. There we go. Anyone who's live on the stream can see a picture of it. Um,
Yay.
it's funny. It's like this candy apple red, which is totally the opposite of what I went in looking for. In fact, the first dealer I went to, and they're like, when I was actually ready to buy, and I wasn't just looking to see what was out there, they're like, "What do you not want in a truck?" Or like, "Did you have a specific color that you do want?" That kind of thing. And it's funny because the thing I told them was, "I don't want white and I don't want red." I ended up with a red truck. But when I was thinking red, I was thinking like fire engine red. I was thinking
Right.
like that dull red that Chevy does make. I think they call it.
Candy red? Is it candy red?
No, I can't remember now. But they have two different reds. One of them is like this really deep looking red, and then the other one is this like flat red. I did not want the flat red. I didn't want to look like a fire truck. But I ended up with this other red, and it's really nice. And I'm talking a whole lot about the color, and that's probably not what people really care about. But it's a 2024 Silverado 1500 RST. Has not like all the crazy bells and whistles, but it's got the tow package that I needed. It's got all kinds of towing assist stuff, which is really nice because, you could argue you don't need all those fancy things, but my God, they come in handy. It's got things like I can put a camera on the trailer hitch while I'm trying to hook it up to the trailer. It's got a feature where if I'm going down the road with the trailer on, it knows the trailer's on, by the way. As soon as you plug in the the trailer brakes, it's like, oh, there's a trailer there, and you tell it how long the trailer is and all that stuff. And if I hit a turn signal, for example, while I have the trailer connected, it puts on a camera that shows down the side of the truck and to the trailer, so I can see on the camera on the dash what I'm going to hit if I cut it too sharp or if I've cleared it.
Mhm.
It's pretty cool. What else? Oh, it's got, you know how modern cars have that lane change assist, where if they
Oh,
think
yeah.
there's someone in your blind spot, the truck's
It'll
going to warn
jerk
you.
you it jerks you back.
This extends it to the length of the trailer.
Oh, wow.
So when I first plugged in the trailer, it said measure your trailer from this point to that point, and then from this one to that one, and tell me all those measurements, so that it knows the dimensions and the turning radius and whatnot of the trailer. And now if I try to switch lanes, it'll account for, with those sensors, whether there's somebody in the pathway of the trailer before I switch lanes, which is also really helpful. Now, yes, I look before I switch lanes anyway, so it's unlikely that I'm going to be hitting somebody, and I'm always super cautious with it. But it's a really nice extra feature, because they call it a blind spot for a reason, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. I better be happy with it, because I'm going to be paying for it for like 7 years,
Yeah. The
and
next
that's
25 years.
yeah.
It's like taking out a
But
mortgage.
I mean, it's nice. It's a nice vehicle. I got it. I think I mentioned this already. I got it with the 5.3 liter. I was really looking for the little Duramax. They have a 3.0 liter Duramax. And when I went and I was ready to buy, the first thing I asked for was the Duramax, and we couldn't find one that was in my price range. Um, and after I talked to a couple folks, they're like, "Yeah, it's probably a good engine, but it's been plagued with some issues. But they did just redesign to fix some of those issues." So I was really ready to like take that chance. But I was talking to a friend of mine. He's like, "The 5.3's been around forever. And if you want an engine that you might have a chance of working on, the 5.3 is one to look at, because the core design of the engine is something like 20 years old or something. So, and there's a lot of aftermarket support for it. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of new fandangled stuff bolted onto it now, that I'd have to figure out. But yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Well, congratulations. I'm very excited for you.
Yeah, I had it out. I got the trailer set up and had it out for a tow already to see how it did with the Jeep on the back of it, because I was worried the Cadillac had a 6.2 liter, and this only has the little 5.3. Little, I
Mhm.
say little. It's still a small V8, and I was worried it wasn't going to have the power. But man, it pulls. I didn't try it on the highway or anything. That'll be some other trip. But I took it up over some mountains here in PA, and yeah, it towed pretty darn well.
Awesome sauce. Very
So
good.
hopefully I can stop talking on the show about all of the weird problems I have with my tow rig now.
Yeah. Moving on from the Cadillac.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, good stuff. All right, so we're not here to talk about your check engine light or my super expensive truck.
We can stop talking about the Cadillac, and hopefully we can stop talking about my engine.
Yeah, two things in once.
Yeah.
Two long running things that we've had to talk
Yeah.
about on the show. But what are we going to talk about next time now,
I
Tammy?
know. I could talk about my purple stuff that I'm gonna do on my Jeep, maybe. I don't know. I gotta figure
There
out
you
more
go.
purple stuff. So, folks, you can find us at offroadinsiders.com. We're also on Instagram. You can email us at offroadinsiders@gmail.com. And we're trying something new tonight, hopefully to get more folks to watch the show, listen to the show. We're streaming also on our YouTube, which you can watch it live there. Or we're hoping to catch some more fish in our net through my YouTube channel and Nate's YouTube channel. So if you're watching on either of those channels, please go over to YouTube, the Off-Road Insiders podcast, and subscribe to us there so you can watch us there as well. So if you're watching on Jeep Mama's YouTube channel or Nate SWB Crawler, head over to Off-Road Insiders and click the, what is it now? Is it the little red subscribe button?
Yep. Yeah, they keep changing that target on us, right?
Yeah. It's like ring the bell. Click, I don't know.
Yeah. definitely subscribe over there. I don't see any reason that we would stop broadcasting to all of these, but if
Right.
you want to make sure you're getting the show, then you should head to the Off-Road Insiders YouTube channel. Unless you're listening audio only, in which case you already
Correct.
know how to find us. Otherwise, you
Yep.
wouldn't be listening to us. But
Right.
if you need a reminder, you can find us wherever you find podcasts. We should be in all the places that podcasts are.
For sure. For sure. All right. Did you remember the community corner?
No, I swear I had something, but I can't find it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I digress. They
So
did the Onyx off-road build challenge games, but I haven't watched any
oh,
of it yet.
so our community corner, we try to highlight something, someone, a vehicle that's in the off-road community.
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys have any suggestions on who you think we should spotlight, shoot us a message.
Could be anything from a cool video you came across to like an interesting picture that someone shared, or even somebody's profile that you think needs a little bit of attention. Feel free to
Mhm.
let us know. We can put it in there.
All right, Nate, I think the rest of this is going to be you because I really don't know a whole lot about this topic.
Yeah.
Uh, I just have I could probably talk about a couple of little things, but nothing big.
Yeah, so I've been
So,
going back and forth. On our last show, we said we were going to talk about axles, and we didn't really go into specifics as to what we were going to talk about. So I thought what we'd start with is some basics, and maybe that'll build into some more advanced stuff. And maybe we will, slowly but surely expand it into more and more expertise. Maybe we'll even have folks that know more about axles on to talk about axles. I know a fair amount, but I don't know. Like, I can't go to a junkyard and give you information about every single 1-ton axle I can see in the junkyard. I know a bit about Dana axles. I know a bit about some Ford axles and Jeep axles, of course. I know a bunch about at least like 90s, 2000s, and 2010 era Jeep axles. So I'm going to do my best to give you like some groundwork here, and then a little bit of the information that I've got. And then if we want to expand further, maybe we'll find some
and
more expertise to bring in, right?
right. Well, the one thing I'm about my axle is I have the Jeep Smile.
Yeah.
So, and we
So
cannot align my axle or we cannot align my Jeep properly. We just got a new alignment sheet at machine at TNT and we can't align it properly because I have a Jeep Smile, which you probably will get into
yeah, we
here.
can certainly talk about some of the pitfalls and whatnot of the lighter duty axles, which is what your
Mhm.
Jeep came with. So, but first, I wanted to go to like complete basics. How the hell does an axle work?
Right.
Because I know when I got started in this industry, it was kind of a mystery, right? Like I knew what an
Mhm.
axle looked like. I knew that there was like spinny things come in and spinny things come out, and they make the wheels turn,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But and obviously there's derivatives for all of this, but at its core, most axles work this way. You have an input yoke, which is if you look at an axle, it's right there. It's called the pinion yoke or the pinion. Um, your drive shaft attaches to that, and it spins it. And as that spins, it drives what's called the pinion shaft or the pinion inside of your axle housing. The pinion engages with a ring gear, which is a big circular gear that kind of goes around what you would consider sort of the spinning axles, right? And it rides on what's called a carrier. The carrier is what makes your differential work. You're probably like, okay, well, what's a differential? A differential is what decides where power goes to from that input, right? Like, how does it go out to the tires, essentially? So, a differential, most commonly, that would be an open differential. Most vehicles come with an open differential. What an open differential does is it essentially sends power to both wheels at the same sort of, I guess it's 50% to each wheel.
Mhm.
However, if one of those wheels loses traction, it spins. All the power goes to that tire, right? That's open. That's undesirable for an off-roader. But that's essentially how an axle works. And if you followed that, spinning force, right, comes in through the pinion. It turns the ring gear. The ring gear turns the carrier. The carrier, based on how it's built, either turns both axle shafts at the same time, turns the one that doesn't have power, or in the case of special like traction controlled or locked differentials, it'll turn both axle shafts, which turns both tires. Got all that?
I think so.
Totally, like
I
clear as mud, right?
yeah, actually, when we were doing the alignment, and there's been very many times where we have Jeeps up on the lift. Like right now, there's a Jeep on the lift getting re-geared, the front and the rear. So I go out and I ask all these questions, and Nick is usually really good at explaining all that, and that's pretty much how I see it in my head, and I see it when I'm at the shop, how all that
Yeah.
works.
Now, again, there's probably people that are like, no, it doesn't work just like that. Keep
Right,
in mind, I'm trying to make this simple.
right.
Right?
This is right,
And again, I'm talking about most axles. I know there's some crazy designs out there that
right.
don't follow what I just described. But let's be honest, who's really using those? Every axle you tear into in an off-road vehicle is probably going to be a ring and pinion setup. It's probably going to have axle shafts that go out to the outer ends. It's
Mhm.
probably going to have a carrier in the middle, and that carrier is going to have some sort of internals that decide how the traction gets dispersed amongst those two shafts and out to your tires.
Right.
Uh-oh, Nikki G's in the chat.
Yeah.
His favorite
Ax
axle is Axle
is
Rose.
Axl Rose. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I
that
just each their
is
own.
yep,
Okay. So now that you're experts on how axles work,
right.
we're going to talk about some of that terminology. So I talked about a ring and pinion. I'm going to gloss over this a little bit because I kind of already described it. The pinion is, so picture two gears that are opposed to each other. Like one is at a 90-degree angle from the other. The pinion gear meshes with the ring gear. When the pinion gear spins, the ring gear spins. The difference in tooth count between the ring gear and the pinion gear is what gives you your axle ratio. So you've heard about ratios like 3:21 or 4:1 or 3.73:1, right? If you hear someone say like, "Oh, I've got 421 axle," or sorry, 410 axle or 410, yeah, I guess that's a good way to good
Right.
nomenclature. I've got 410 axles. What they mean is they've got
Gears.
roughly 4 teeth on the ring gear to every 1 tooth on the pinion gear, right? Which means they have 4.1 gears to every 1 gear on the pinion gear. And that's the ratio, right? You have 4.1 to 1. If you say you've got 321 gears, it means you have 3.21 gears on the ring gear to every 1 gear on the pinion gear. Every time these things are abbreviated to 321, 373, what people are leaving off is the 1, right? So usually this is written out as 4.10 colon 1 or 4.11 colon 1, which tells it 4 to 1, right? Same thing with a transfer case. You heard people talk about the Rubicon transfer case. I've got a 4 to 1 transfer case. Same concept. 4 to 1 is the ratio in your transfer case. So axles work the same way.
Ooh,
Ah,
sorry.
what'd you do? Tammy's
Yeah.
breaking stuff.
Yeah, sorry.
Let's go back. There we go.
I was
Don't
trying to
mess with
add a
Restream while I'm
yeah,
talking.
no. I I was trying to add a picture. I had a picture of some stuff, but I don't know how to do it. Okay, I'll let you continue. Sorry.
Okay, no problem, no problem. Okay, so that's how a ring and pinion roughly works. Now, I talked about open carriers versus locked carriers versus whatever. I'm going to get a little more into what those are when we get there, but the carrier is the thing the ring gear is bolted to, and as the ring gear spins, it spins the carrier. Okay. Let's see. The next thing would be the axle shafts themselves. These are literally metal shafts that mate to the carrier or the internals of the carrier, and then they go out and they somehow mount to your tires. Now, there's a couple ways they could mount to the tires. You've heard the terms probably full float and semi float. Does this sound familiar, Tammy?
Mm-hmm.
It
Yep.
should. I talked about this on the Jeep Talk Show like umpteen years ago.
Don't ask me to explain it.
Okay, well, there's some nuance here, right? And I guess the simplest way I can describe this is a semi-float axle. The axle shaft is not only responsible for turning the tire, but it's responsible for holding the tire, right? So the
Mhm.
tire and rim usually will bolt directly to the axle shaft, right? There'll be a flange at the end of the axle shaft and there'll be studs on it and you bolt the tire on. There's a couple other ways that happen. For example, the Dana 30 and the 44 that's in the front of a Wrangler, I believe, is also semi-float, but it still uses a hub. But the hub
Mhm.
won't support the tire without a shaft in it, right? So the shaft is still responsible for holding kind of that
Right.
shear force of the tire, the force that's like pressing upward on the wheel. The axle shaft has to be there to support that. If you take a stub shaft out of a Dana 44, you might get a mile or two, you might get a couple miles, but that'll eventually break apart and you're going to lose the front tire. Bad stuff happens when you lose the front tire, so don't do that.
Yes, for sure.
Um, Conversely, a full float axle means that the shaft is only responsible for turning the tires. The tire itself is supported by something at the end of the axle that supports the entire weight of the tire. Usually that's a spindle with a hub or a spindle and a bearing. And then the bearing or the hub will have a flange on it that the tire bolts to, or not the tire. I keep saying the tire, the rim that holds the tire bolts to, right?
Right.
Yeah. Video says semi-float also have shafts that support the weight of the vehicle. No, yes, that's what I'm talking about. So the weight of the tire, I think I said the weight of the tire. What I mean is the weight of the vehicle on the tire is supported by the axle shaft when you're in a semi-float configuration. A full float configuration, if you break an axle shaft and pull the whole shaft out, you can still drive on that axle because the hub and the spindle are supporting the entire weight of that particular tire.
Mhm.
Now, you won't have any drive to that tire, of course, but if you've got a locked differential, you might still have drive to the other tire, right? So in a full float, you can actually get away with that, which is one of the reasons that full floats are sometimes desirable for off-road rigs. Not only that, but they're stronger in general because the axle shaft is not responsible for holding the weight of the vehicle up as well as turning the tire, right? So if you're in some crazy situation where you're like loading and unloading the rear tires because you're trying to get up a ledge and you're hopping and whatever, there's that much less force on the axle shafts that would make them break in a semi-float configuration than there would be in a full float configuration. I'm
I'm
talking a
still
whole
with
lot. You
Yeah,
still with me?
I'm still with you. I feel bad. I can't really
No,
contribute
it's
much
fine. The
to
last
this
couple
one.
shows have been really on you, and I've just been
Yeah,
throwing in commentary. So
we take
it's
turns.
about time I put in my dues, right? I do
Yeah.
need a drink though. Hold on.
Yeah, your mouth is probably getting parched.
All right. I talked a little bit about differentials. There's a couple ways that a differential, that's that center section of the tire, that's what's in what you'd refer to as the pumpkin or
Pumpkin.
the
Yep.
center of the housing. That's where the ring gear mounts and the pinion turns. There's, and I was thinking through this as I was writing this out. There's basically 4 ways that can be configured, and 3 of them are really similar. One of them is open. And the way an open differential works, there was a really cool video I found on this once. I swear it was from the 40s. It's this guy with like these sticks, and there was an act there like these this like spool with sticks in it was representing the side gears in the axle,
Right.
and then there was an axle that came out the side. Again, it was just a stick, and he used the pencil in the middle, and he'd turn it all together, and then he turned one and the other, and it was a really good depiction of how an open carrier works. I'll have to find it and see if I can throw it into the
The
notes of the show.
notes.
But basically, if you picture top and bottom, left and right of an open carrier, there's 4 gears in there. The top and bottom are called spider gears, and the 2 sides are called side gears. They look almost identical to each other, though. And they all are almost identical to each other. They're usually all the same size. And what happens is those gears take the force that would be sent to the tires and differentiate it. That's why it's called the differential, right? But they'll sort of equalize it and send it out to the tires. It's really difficult to explain without any illustration. But the point
Right.
is, the thing you need to understand is if both tires have traction, and people argue about this all the time, it either has 100% of 100% of the force to both tires or 50% each. I'm not a physicist. But essentially, both of your rear tires will have force. They will turn. They will give you traction, and you will propel your vehicle forward. If one of those tires loses traction, it
In
will
the mud
spin,
or
mud, snow, ice, whatever.
right.
It'll spin, and the other one will get no more power,
It'll
right?
just keep spinning and spinning and spinning.
Now, you might say, why the hell would they design an axle that way? Well, in some circumstances, mainly on-road driving in bad conditions, that is actually desirable, right? Anyone who's driven in the snow or the ice knows
Mhm.
that when that tire starts to spin, sure, you're not moving, but you're also not fishtailing, right? Because the one tire that doesn't have any power is acting like a rudder, right? To keep your vehicle moving in a straight direction. Now,
Right.
it's not perfect, but if you've ever driven a locked axle in the snow, you know that all it takes is one tire to break traction. All of a sudden, they're both spinning and you're fishtailing all over the place. Not really desirable. Which leads me into the next type of differential, which is a locker. And I'm going to go with an auto locker first. You might think auto locker sounds awesome because I don't have to think about it. It locks when it needs to lock and it unlocks when it doesn't, except it doesn't quite unlock. And again, this is going to depend on the brand of auto locker you get. But usually, with an auto locker, both rear tires get power sent to them, even if one of them breaks traction. Now, if you go around a turn, think about the tire on the inside and the tire on the outside when you're going around a turn. The one on the outside has to spin a little bit faster, right? And with an auto locker, the locker will allow it to spin a little bit faster, but that usually builds up within the differential as tension. I don't know exactly how it does it, if there's springs in there or what, but it builds up as tension. And eventually it has to unload, right? Now, if I'm making like S turns back and forth and they're all completely equal, then it'll unload automatically as as say the passenger side tire is spinning faster than the driver. That'll load up some tension. And then if you turn the other way and the driver's side tire is spinning faster than the passenger, that'll unload some tension. And it goes back and forth like that.
Mhm.
Eventually, if you make like all right turns, eventually that locker has to unload and you get this loud like clang, and it actually feels like it's going to send the back of your Jeep into another lane because that tire all of a sudden like has
Right. All
power
this.
to it that you didn't tell it, right? So that's one of the downsides. If that happens in the snow, you're going to really regret it. If it happens on the highway, you're going to feel like you like need to change your pants. So those are some of the downsides to an auto locker.
So
Generally, sorry, go
if
ahead.
do you have to be in four-wheel drive for that?
No,
Or like 4 low or 4 high?
nope. They
Okay.
are. It is. You basically have no control over when it's locked and when it's not.
So are those that would be in like I don't like the is it the Grand Wagoneer or some of the newer Jeeps with, they have where you can lift them up by pushing a button, you can gain clearance. Don't some of those newer fancier Jeeps with all the automatic stuff, is that where you would
No, this is much
Oh.
older technology than that.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
So this is all gear driven. There's no electronics in there.
Okay.
There's nothing smart about it. It's all mechanical.
Okay.
And I had one in my YJ back in the early 2000s, right?
Okay.
So Detroit, for example, if you've heard like
Oh,
the
okay,
legendary
Detroit.
Detroit
Yep, Detroit
locker,
locker. Yep, yep, yep.
that's an auto locker. Right. Now obviously Detroit makes stuff that's not an auto locker, but the Detroit soft locker, I think they call it. There's
Right.
nothing soft about this locker. I don't know why they call it that, but it's basically locked all the time, and it'll do that load and unload thing where
Okay.
it sometimes throws you for a loop. But that is usually much cheaper than buying a selectable locker, which is what you fancy Rubicon owners get out of the box.
Right.
But there's one more thing I wanted to cover that's kind of in between before I got to um, selectable lockers, and that is spools. A spool is if you were to take the internals of that differential and replace that with basically a shaft that connects the two halves of the axle together.
Mhm.
Right. That's why they call it a spool, because it looks like a spool that goes between the two axle shafts. It is 100% locking both axle shafts together. There is nothing nuanced. There's nothing smart about it. There's no gears even involved except for the ring and pinion, right? They're literally locked together. Some people get away with this by literally welding the side and spider gears together inside of their
Ooh.
open differential, which is generally a bad way to go. It's a cheap way to go. If you're building something that has to go straight and nothing but straight, it works out pretty well. As soon as you make a turn, you start chirping tires. You're going to wear your tires faster. It might be okay for trail only use, a spool. I would not weld the side and spider gears though. That's like a cheap, like backyard hack way to get it done. I don't recommend
Mhm.
it. But I guess if you're building a super low buck vehicle that you're trying to just get locked, you could do it that way. But that's another way to do it. A lot of drag racers use spools because they don't need anything smart. They need to go straight and fast,
Right.
right? So they use a
Boom.
spool
And
because
short.
it's dirt simple and it's pretty strong, right? So good thing for a drag racer. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about from a differential perspective is probably the best of both worlds, which is the selectable locker. Selectable lockers, now these all come in different flavors, but usually when they're locked, they're more like a spool. And when they're unlocked, they're either more like an open carrier or a limited slip differential, which I guess that's a fifth option I didn't talk
Yeah, I
about.
was gonna say.
A limited slip differential. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. But this is the sort like you get in your Rubicon, or like you get from ARB, or like you get from the Eaton E-Locker or the Ox Locker. You have something, a knob, a button, an airline, whatever, in um, your cockpit that you hit and it'll lock the thing, and then you hit it again, it'll unlock the thing. And this is probably the best, especially for someone who drives their rig on the road and on the trail, right? Because we go to get on the road, unlock them, and it's driving like a normal street vehicle. Go off road, maybe you leave them unlocked until you need them. Some people lock them as soon as they hit the trail. That's up to you. I don't really recommend locking them all the time because you're going to get some weird driving characteristics. But you can. Oh, I see you put a comment up from Nikki G.
Yeah, sorry, I'm
About
distracting you.
and a true track limited slip in the rear, right? So we'll talk about true track or we'll talk about limited slip in a sec. But my point is, you turn them on and off. This is also really good for the front axle use case on any vehicle, whether it's a hardcore off-roader or not. Because if you have a locked front axle, it gets harder to steer, right? So even on the trail, on dirt, on snow, whatever, you'll turn the wheel, and because
Oh.
both wheels are trying to spin at the same speed, you'll end up getting some really weird binding and weird steering characteristics. In the
Oh,
snow,
that's
I've seen it.
frustrating.
In the snow, I've seen it that you turn it all the way to one side and you keep going straight
Yeah.
because it can't
Yep.
it can't make the tires spin differently, and it's like physics don't turn you like you expect it to. So being able to unlock the front axle is a really good thing to be able to do.
It's funny
Now,
sometimes when you're on the trail and the spotter's going, "Passenger, passenger," and I'm like, "I can't turn anymore," because it's so hard when you're locked
it's
up like that.
yeah. Well, there's two things that'll bind you up there. One is literally if there's things stopping the wheels from turning, and the
Right,
other would of course be the locker. The locker can make it difficult to get
right.
the wheels turned.
Yep.
So limited slip is the fifth option. I don't know how I forgot this when I was writing down the notes, but a limited slip. And again, there's a couple ways that you can get this done. Most of the ones that I've seen use like friction plates within an open carrier. It's very similar to an open carrier, but behind the side gears are these friction plates that when one tire starts to spin, the friction plates will make that side gear kind of engage. And once it engages, you don't get 100% traction, but you get a fraction of that traction sent back to the tire that's not spinning, right?
Mhm.
That's why they call it a limited slip. It's not a locker, it's not open, it's somewhere in the middle, right? You still get some slip out of them, but when they start to slip, they'll start to grab on the one that is not turning. They'll start to like kind of lock, not quite lock, but like a lock, right? It's not really a lock. It's more like I don't know. Imagine if you're rubbing two pieces of sandpaper together, how they kind of grab, but they don't necessarily pull each other with each other. Imagine that. It's more like friction than it is an actual
Mhm.
positive lock. So that's another option for a differential. Those are good for like everyday drivers, weekend wheelers that don't really want to go so hardcore that they have
Mhm.
a full locker. They don't want to spend the money on a selectable. A limited slip will be useful. I have a limited slip in the back of the LJ from factory, and the thing works really well. Like, you know. Okay, I think you had a question that you had just highlighted, and now
No,
I'm.
I was just people. We are got lots of chat going on here,
That's awesome.
so I'm just Michael. I just showed two of our folks in the chat room, Nikki G and Michael Harper. They were just sharing. Yeah, Michael Harper just shared that his is a limited slip normally when not
Yeah,
locked. So
yeah,
just
and
sharing
I
a few.
I'd love to generalize, but it really is different per manufacturer. I'd say a lot of them become limited slips when they're unlocked, but also a good number of them are 100% open when they're unlocked. So really, it's the thing you're going to have to look into. And now that you know the difference between an open carrier and a limited slip, you can make that choice based on what you know, right? Instead of just what the salesman's trying to tell you.
Mhm.
Okay. We've been going quite a bit. What time is it?
Yeah,
Wow, we got like 13 minutes left.
yeah. We really don't have a whole lot of news, so if you have something
That's fine.
else, yeah.
So let me try to get through the last couple topics I
Yep,
had.
for
The
sure.
next I wanted to talk about was different models of axles. Like I said at the beginning, I'm more versed in like Dana axles because it's just kind of what I've always worked with, and it's what's always come in the Jeeps that I've owned. But there are lots of different manufacturers of axles. Every auto manufacturer, they either make their own in-house axles or they buy from a third party, and a really common third party they buy from is Dana, just
Correct.
because Dana is like this trusted name in this particular field. Jeeps, like everything after the CJ, I think the CJ had like an in-house built rear axle. Was it the AMC 20? This is like foggy. I haven't looked at CJs in so long. But the YJ, the TJ, the JK, and as far as I know, the JL all had Dana axles. Now, someone correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I think they were all Dana. Most of the YJs were a Dana 30 front, Dana 35 rear. The Dana 35 is a C-clipped, like terrible abomination of an axle. If you can avoid it, don't buy one. But the reason I say it's an abomination is remember that full float versus semi float thing I talked about? The Dana 35 makes it even worse. And that axle shaft, the way the bearing is set up and everything, if you break that shaft, it just walks its way out of the axle. Right.
Oh,
So you'll have your whole tire, brakes, and everything just walk their way out of the axle on the side of the trail. If you ever seen one of those pictures where someone has a log strapped under their axle because they couldn't keep
uh-huh.
the tire on, they were probably on the Dana 30. That or they broke it at the flange and they couldn't keep it on. But the Dana 44 has the bearing at the outer end of the axle, and it's like pressed on, and it's behind a backing plate. So even if you break the axle shaft inside the axle somewhere, the wheel will still stay on. You just won't get any power to it. And usually you can still drive on that, at least to get back to the trailhead and get things fixed. Dana 35, you can't do that. Anyway, the other axle that's been commonly in the rear of the Jeep is a Dana 44. Of course, you Rubicon owners probably already know that you had a Dana 44 front and rear.
Front, rear. Woo woo.
Yep. The I
And I
want to
think
say, sorry, go ahead.
and there are I think don't quote me, I think there are like my gear ratios 410s, right?
Yeah. I
Yes.
think
There's
I
some that are a little better than that, some models, correct? Or
so the
maybe I'm wrong.
410, from what I recall, and I could be wrong about this because there are special models that used a slightly deeper gear set than the 410,
Yeah,
I think. But the mass produced Jeeps, I'll say, I
correct.
think the lowest they went was a 410 to 1 ratio, and that was in the Rubicons.
Mhm.
Most Jeeps that were not Rubicons had either a 373 or a
73, yep.
321 axle ratio.
Maybe that's what I
Um,
was thinking of.
right.
I
JK has
think
a Dana 35 was. Yeah. So that was, so I was just about to get to. There is a Dana 35 that was redesigned. I thought it was in the JL, but maybe it's in the JK as well. That was an option other than the Dana 44. The both JKs I've owned had a Dana 44 rear. I thought it was the JL when they switched to 35, but I could be wrong about that. But they changed the design, if I remember correctly, that it doesn't have that same problem where the axle shafts walk out. Again, I haven't owned one, so I haven't looked at the internals. I'm not really sure. But, your mileage may vary. All the axles I just talked about are semi-float axles. When you get into the larger Dana axles, like the 60, the 70, the 80, they become full float axles. And that's usually when you get into the 1-ton range, right? There's also popular axles. I think Chevy or GM makes the corporate 14 bolt, which is like a legendary axle. They're easier to set up than Dana axles are. They're super beefy, but they're also super big. And that's the thing you got to think about when you're going into these bigger axles. The housing itself, in order to be stronger and to have stronger internals, the whole housing gets bigger. If you're talking about like a freaking dump truck where it doesn't matter how much
Right.
clearance you have underneath, it doesn't matter how big the thing
Right.
is.
Right.
But when you're talking about an off-road rig, the bigger that pumpkin, the more you're going to drag it on stuff.
Correct.
14 bolt is notorious for being a ridiculously large axle housing, and people actually shave off the bottom of the differential and put a plate on there to get like 1.5 inches more clearance out of it because it's that big that it's that painful. Dana 60 is also a pretty big axle. The 70 and 80, big axles. So you got to think about these things if you're going to start switching to 1-tons. That's why whenever someone goes to tons, you see them go straight to 38s, 40s because they need the bigger tire to clear those axles.
Correct.
Okay, that's like a crash course on axle models. A bunch of manufacturers make a bunch of different types of axles. Like I said, watching people on YouTube, I've seen some crazy designs out of Toyota where like the axle housing splits in half when you take it apart. I've seen them that like the whole third member comes out. That's something I haven't even talked about yet. The ring and
Wow.
pinion are sometimes included in a thing called a third member, which actually comes out of the entire housing. And the housing, the Ford 9-inch is like this. But the housing just holds the third member, which means for gear setups and stuff, you take the whole third member out, you put it on your bench, you set up the gears, you put it back in. It's also a stronger design because the pinion, if I remember, is double shear with the way the bearings are set up. I'm totally rambling about stuff here, and people are probably getting lost. So there's one last thing I wanted to talk about as far as axles are concerned, and this is something I don't have a lot of experience with, but I've looked at a number of times over the years, and that's portal axles. Now, you might think a portal is like a way to get to a different dimension.
That's what I was thinking.
That's kind of the case here, but
So
the
you
dimension is
could
below.
I was thinking, I could skip this obstacle and still stay on the
Yeah, right.
trail.
Just I'm on the other side of the axle.
Right.
No, they don't work quite that well. Although, I mean, you might say they work that well because what it does is the end of the axle. Now they make like bolt-on portals that'll bolt onto the flange where your tire mounts
Mhm.
to, and then your tire mounts below it. There's other axles. The Unimog is famous for this. That the axle itself has built-in portals, and what a portal is at the end of the axle. There's a gear-driven. What's the best way to describe this? Like a drop down. That here's the axle shaft, or here's the axle housing, and then a couple inches down is where the tires mount to. And inside of that unit at the ends is another gear reduction.
Right.
Right? So
Oh,
the
so you can go
tires are actually spinning faster or slower than the shafts, depending on how you have those gears set up. It means a couple things. One, it raises the whole housing up a little bit. And when the housing is up higher, of course, that improves ground clearance. But the other thing it does is it makes the strain on the axle shafts that much less because there's another gear reduction going on between the tire and the axle shaft because the portal itself handles its own gear reduction as well. So it's a really cool setup. You have to really think through if you're going to try to use those or not because you have a lot to think about as far as axle clearance and ground clearance and how high it's going to make the rig and whether it's going to be top heavy or not. So a lot to think about when you're thinking about portals, but really cool stuff. There's also like crazy strong stuff like Rockwells. I don't know enough about Rockwells to talk about them. I just know that they are insanely beef.
So when people use the Atlas transfer case, right?
Yeah.
Do you have to do anything to your axles when you put that in, or is that just in the transfer case part?
That's all transfer case. That's all
Okay.
gearing within the transfer case, just like your Rubicon transfer case is.
Right. So that you wouldn't have to worry about re-gearing or anything if you put that in.
Right. So
Okay.
basically, the way your drivetrain generally works is engine makes torque, makes spinnies.
Right.
Those spinnies go into your transmission. The transmission is by design, right, by nature, is a whole bunch of different gear sets that you can change the ratio between the input and the output. That's how you get your
Right.
different gears going down the highway. The
Right.
transfer case in a four-wheel drive application takes that and splits it across the rear and the front. That's how you get four-wheel drive. And then there
Okay.
could be another gear reduction there. If you have a single speed transfer case, it's just 1-to-1. There's no gear reduction. But if you have a low range, then you have another, I think it's like 2.7-to-1 in the Wrangler, and it's 4-to-1 in the Rubicon. And the
Mhm.
Atlas has a whole bunch of options. You can go as crazy as like
Right.
5 or 6-to-1. And then there's 2 or 3 or 4 speed transfer cases where you have like a low range, a super low range, and a crazy, ridiculous low range. And then, of course, you've got the axles themselves where there's another gear reduction that happens. So you can get crazy low gear reduction between the engine and the tires by messing around with all those different gear reductions between,
Mhm.
one from one end to the other.
I just got notified that Elon Musk is having a private live stream for subscribers only, and I'm a
I'm gonna,
subscriber.
I'm just gonna, well, maybe I won't say anything about Elon Musk.
No, I would love to, um, get him to give me a Cybertruck to test on the trails for a YouTube video.
Okay, well, if you can pull that off, I wouldn't
I
mind it so
know,
much.
don't you
But
think that would be there's a Cybertruck that lives just right downtown
yep,
here in one of the
if
apartments, and I see it. Sorry, I
if
got
you
distracted.
if you get a free Cybertruck to review, do I have permission to come
Yes.
and make fun of it?
Yes, of course.
God, that
Anyway, I
man.
didn't mean to sidetrack you. I didn't
Well,
mean to
I was just about
sidetrack
done
you.
anyway.
Yeah.
So, folks, I just rattled off a ton of information
You
really
might
quickly.
have to watch it a couple of times.
If you have to watch it in slow motion,
Yeah,
then go
look
ahead.
up I'm a
Um,
picture person. That's why I was trying to post up a picture.
yeah, if
We'll
I
have to
if
practice
I
that.
if I missed something, if I got something wrong, please leave a comment. Let me know. It could be that I misspoke. I do that plenty of times. It could be that I have a misunderstanding about how these things work. But feel free to let me know. I'm not opposed to improving through
Right.
constructive criticism.
Right.
So leave
Right.
constructive criticism.
Right.
If you just yell at me about how ridiculous and stupid I am, then I'm probably not going to internalize that.
So speaking of axles, all these things you talked about aren't in a Honda Civic, right? Or
They
a
are just in a
Toyota.
whole different setup.
Correct.
So, I guess a Honda Civic is a bad example, but at
Right.
its core, all this stuff exists in a Honda Civic, except there's not a separate axle with a separate gear reduction. You have what's called a transaxle, which at
That's
least
what
I
it's
think this
called.
is how they're still done, where the
Yeah.
transmission basically like the axle shafts come right out of the transmission. Um,
So
but
it's totally different in some of these other vehicles. And
I
does
also 100% didn't even talk about independent suspension. That's a whole other ball game. This is all solid axles.
so a Tesla has no axles, right?
Yeah,
Because
a
those are
Tesla is
all
a whole different thing.
right.
A Tesla, as far as I understand, has an independent electric motor at each wheel.
Mhm.
Um, or at least I guess the
That's
four-wheel
how
drive
I
models have
understand
it
it,
at
yeah.
each wheel. Maybe the sedans only have it at 2 wheels. I don't know, but so yeah, and
Anyway,
that's actually really neat when you think about it, because you could theoretically have independent control of every single wheel,
Mhm.
which is neat. It's a neat concept. I
Yeah.
just think that truck is horrendously ugly, and
Oh, well,
I would never even want to be near one, let alone drive it.
I don't know, I just think it would be fascinating to see what it because they drive by themselves, to see how it
Yeah.
would do on the
No, I mean,
trails.
come on.
Yeah.
I am a nerd at heart. I would love to
Right.
see it just to understand how the technology works. And if you could change it out for a body that doesn't look like it's a 1990s PlayStation game, I might even drive one. But
Or
yeah,
a 1970s space vehicle, you know?
it looks like a
Yeah,
Pinewood Derby car.
it does. Anyway, um, and they're all the same color.
They are. They're all aren't they stainless steel?
Mhm.
You know, the
Yeah,
the last company that tried that was DeLorean, and we saw how that turned out.
yeah.
They need to make a new Back to the Future that's based on a Cybertruck.
Yeah, that'd be pretty funny. Well, when Elon, ships me out the Cybertruck to do a review on, I'll
If we
mention
can
that
get
to
it
him.
up to 88 miles per hour and get it
Yeah.
struck by lightning, maybe we
Oh,
can.
I bet you I guarantee you what did you see it was, pulling a Porsche. Oh, here come the fire trucks. It was pulling a Porsche racing a Lamborghini or something. I don't remember. Anyway, it went super fast.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Electric motors have crazy torque and the ability to go super fast. The
Hmm.
problem is the energy source is so finite, right?
Oh, yeah.
While I was researching trucks, I found this guy. He does YouTube videos about truck reviews and specifically about towing. And he got his hands on the EV Silverado and he took it on his towing test. And it's
Oh,
like a 120-mile loop that he goes on. He got halfway and had to stop to charge it.
charge it. Yeah.
And then the
And you
charger
can't,
didn't work right.
and you
So he had to
probably
go
can't
another
run the
quarter.
air or the heat.
He had to go another quarter of the way back to another charging station, and then he got a little more juice out of it. He said that it towed amazing, but the range was just such a problem.
Yep. Yep.
So, until we can
Let's
solve
work
that
that out.
problem, like
Yeah.
electric cars are going to be limited to commuter vehicles, I think. And we're all going
I
to, people that have to tow, people that have to move freight, they're all going to be stuck with, fossil fuel driven vehicles.
Yep. Yep.
It'll come. I don't know if it'll come in our lifetime. It'll come eventually.
Just technology, like just look at our phones, electric vehicles will eventually get to that point.
Oh yeah, exactly. Technology, and we've talked about this before. Technology, there's always like a curve to it. Something new comes out. The something new works terribly, and it's super expensive. But the super rich people will put money into it because they
Mhm.
think it's really cool technology, and it'll get better, and it'll get cheaper, and it'll get better, and it'll get cheaper, and it'll get better, and it'll get cheaper, and it just keeps going through that until the average person can afford it. And then the average person gets their hand on it, and they're like, "Wow, this is terrible." And then it keeps getting better and cheaper and better and cheaper until finally we
Right.
not only have an affordable thing, but it's also good, right?
Correct.
We're nowhere near there yet, I think, with electric
No.
vehicles. We'll get there eventually. We're just not there yet.
Right. All right. So axles. I'm excited. We had a lot of people watching, a lot of people talking in our chat room. Michael,
We
thank you.
did.
Videos.
We did.
We
So folks that
had
are watching,
Nikki G
just leave a
and
comment in chat and say where you're watching from because I'm kind of curious. It doesn't give me a
Overland,
breakdown here.
British Columbia. Okay, I know videos. Where? Like, are you watching from Jeep Mama or are you watching
Like which
from S?
channel? Which channel
Yeah,
are you watching from? I'd love to hear.
yeah, yeah.
And
It's
then
a good
it's a battle to see who tuned into
Yeah,
SWB Crawler versus Jeep Mama versus Off
we
Road
could
Insider.
have a little contest.
Yeah,
We could have a contest. And the loser has to eat an onion just like the bearded Jeeper and I
I
at one
am
time.
not eating an onion.
Yeah, no. I
The
just
loser
bit
has to
into
eat
it.
Scrapple. How's that sound?
Yeah. Oh, no. No. My
Oh well,
ex
then
would
I'm not gonna
use
mind losing. I like Scrapple.
Oh, he would fry that up and the whole house would stink and grease would be everywhere and
Yeah,
oh,
it's terrible for you, and don't think about
yeah.
how it's made. But
No, I read the
don't
ingredients.
never do
That's
that.
icky.
There's a
That
couple things you should never know how are made:
Yeah.
sausage, Scrapple, and laws.
Oh, yucky, yucky. Yeah. You don't wanna watch it being made either
Yeah,
because they just scrape it up off the floor.
shh, you're ruining it.
I
So there's a
know.
couple comments about Dana 35s in the JK. Um, I can tell you that I've had two JK Sports. They both had Dana 44s in the back, and we didn't do anything special to get that. So I don't know what incantation of the JK had a Dana 35, but enough people are saying it that I presume it must be true.
Mm-hmm. All right, so
Michael Harper says he has a 35 up front and a 44 rear. I didn't know the
there.
35 was ever made in a front application. You sure that's not a Dana 30 up front? Should be a 30. I could be wrong. Maybe they made a steering 35. I've never heard of it, though. Okay, anyway, we did have a news article. Did you want to cover that quick, and then we'll move on?
Oh, I just wanted to mention, if you're into overlanding and if you're into the Overland Expos, they are announcing a new Overland Expo starting in March 15th and 16th in 2025, and it's in California, Costa Mesa, California. They just so now we have one on the East Coast, the West Coast, one's in Colorado, and one is in Arizona. So now we have one in California. So all those folks on the West Coast can go camping. There's exhibitors. They have education classes. And you can go to overlandexpo.com and then click on West in their tabs bar. And you can sign up for that. They can get kind of expensive, but there's so much information there. And roundtable discussions, expert presenters talking about overlanding. So that's in Costa Mesa, California.
Costa Mesa, California.
Yes. So there you go.
All right.
News, quick and dirty.
Well, this has been a fun episode.
Yes.
I hope everybody has enjoyed me rattling on about axles. I hope I got everything right, and nobody has anything to complain about.
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. Everything's fine.
So in next podcast, do we want to do that as our topic, or do we just
we were thinking about talking about steel versus aluminum, so we're gonna have to come up with some topics around that. I have some opinions on steel versus aluminum. Maybe you've got some working at TNT that'll help us out, elongate that conversation.
Right, we can talk about skid plates and wheels and the new Jeep, what Jeep has done to the newer Jeeps to help with their emissions.
Oh, we could go on about aluminum body panels and all that stuff.
Yeah. So
I think we have an episode there. We can certainly talk about that.
So anyway, thank you, folks. Again, you can find us at offroadinsiders.com, and I am at jeepmama.com.
Yep, and I'm at swvcrawler.com.
So
check us out there. Now I got to figure out how to close the show without being awkward here because of the new platform.
And instead, they'll just be watching us all night.
Yeah, right. How do I stop? Oh, no. All right, folks. Everybody have a great one. We'll catch you in the next episode.